On the night of November 9th, 1938, violent anti-Jewish demonstrations broke out across Germany, Austria, and the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. Over the next 48 hours, as told by the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., violent mobs spurred by anti-Semitic exhortations from Nazi officials destroyed hundreds of synagogues, burning or desecrating Jewish religious artifacts along the way. Acting on orders from the Gestapo, police officers and firefighters did nothing to prevent the destruction. All told, approximately 7,500 Jewish-owned businesses, homes, and schools were plundered, and 91 Jews were murdered. An additional 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Nazi officials immediately claimed that the Jews themselves were to blame for the riots, and a fine of 1 billion Reichsmarks, about $400 million in 1938, was imposed on the German Jewish community. The Nazis came to call the event Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, referring to the thousands of shattered windows that littered the streets afterwards. But the euphemism does not convey the full brutality of the event. Kristallnacht was a turning point in the history of the Third Reich, marking the shift from anti-Semitic rhetoric and legislation to the violent, aggressive, anti-Jewish measures that would culminate with the Holocaust. British historian Martin Gilbert observed that no event in the history of German Jews was so widely reported as it was happening. But we know that despite the outcry and the publicity surrounding Kristallnacht, the tepid response of the world, FDR recalled an ambassador, signaled that there would be no reaction as Jewish blood was spilt. The combination of the Evian conference that summer, the capitulation to Hitler that September with the Munich Agreement, and then, of course, Kristallnacht, it became evident to Hitler that the world would stand by and do nothing. And we know the horrific culmination of that knowledge in Hitler's mind. And so when we gather here tonight to observe Kristallnacht through music and through memory, it's also a prompt to action. That as Jews, we know, in the words of Elie Wiesel, that the opposite of love is not hate, but it's indifference, that we do not stand idly by in our time, here and now, and in the future. Through music and through words, we'll remember. We'll begin our evening by way of music. We turn to Simon Sargent, a composer, pianist, and educator, professor emeritus of the Composition and Meadows School of the Arts, holds a BA from Brandeis, a master's in composition from the Juilliard School. He has taught at a wide variety of schools and served as the chair of the Voice and Opera Department at the Rubin Academy of Music in Jerusalem. He also created a nationally acclaimed Jewish music program as director of music at Temple Emmanuel in Dallas, where he served for 27 years. He received the Meadows Foundation Distinguished Teaching Professorship in 2009, and it's an honor to have him, to have Bonnie, and to have your grandson Adam here with us on this evening. We turn it over to you, Simon, to introduce what we are about to hear.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Rabbi Cosgrove. It's really an honor to be here this evening with you, and a very exciting evening for me to hear the first performance, the world premiere of Azkara, a Jewish requiem. Actually, the seed for this piece was planted many years ago during a conversation with my dear friend, cantor Ephraim Biran, who served as the cantor at Temple Rodef Shalom here in New York for many years, he pointed out to me, he said, look, there are so many monumental, great works in the symphonic and choral repertoire, requiem masses, funeral masses, requiems, all drawn from the Christian tradition. But we don't have anything in Judaism that is comparable. And he turned to me and he said, why don't you write such a piece? At the moment, I didn't take up on his suggestion. But as the years passed, I became more and more interested in that idea, in that void in the symphonic literature. And gradually I gathered texts that I thought were appropriate, that expressed the Jewish approach, distinctively Jewish approach, to mourning and to loss. I was going on a new path because there were no models. There was nothing to follow. So I chose those texts that meant a lot to me as a mourner, and those texts that were invariably associated with death and burial in Judaism. I ordered them in a way that would offer variety of mood and variety of thematic expression of consolation, of solace. And I'm deeply grateful this evening to Cantor Aziz Schwartz, the wonderful cantor of this congregation, to David Enlow, his music director, and to the Park Avenue Synagogue Choir, who are going to present the premiere for you in just a moment. It's my hope that in the future, other Jewish composers will turn to this neglected genre of composition and will write music to memorialize individuals or events such as the memorialization of Kristallnacht this evening, music that will touch and move the listeners, the mourners, music that will speak from the Jewish perspective of the sorrows of mourning and grieving and loss. Thank you for coming.
Adam, Adam, להבל דמה, ימר קצל, קצל עובר, בבוקר, בבוקר, יציץ וחזף לערב. לערב ימולל, ימולל ויבש. לערב, לערב. ימולל ויבש. כי גז חיש ונעופה. Adonai roi lo echsar bino deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yenaleni nafshi yeshover. גם כי ילך בגיא המוות לא יירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שיבתך ומשענתך ארוך לפניי שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי, כוסי, כוסי רוויה. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. זכור אני מחלד על מה שבראת כל בני אדם. חציר ימה כציץ השדה כן יציץ כי רוחב רבו ואיננו ולא יכירנו עוד מקומו. עצור תמים פולו, כי חוד רחב משפט, ולמונה ונווה, צדיק וישר הוא, ולמונה ונווה, צדיק וישר הוא. בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם. וינוחו בשלום על משכבם. וינוחו בשלום על משכבם. ברוך דיין האמת. ברוך דיין האמת. ברוך דיין האמת. יהי שם אדוני מבורך. יהי שם אדוני מבורך. יהי שם אדוני מבורך.
To Simon Sargon, to Cantor Schwartz, to David Enlow, to our vocalists, thank you so much. Well, I would hate to be the rabbi to have to speak after that, so I won't. In fact, originally we were planning on having Bernard-Henri Lévy here this evening, but his commitments required him to return to France, and so we recorded a conversation that we will now bear witness to through the screens here or wherever you are at home for the next 25 minutes. Bernard-Henri Lévy, I believe will read his bio momentarily, pre-recorded, but his new book, The Will to See, documents his travels around the world and the message of Kristallnacht today as perhaps the preeminent philosopher activist of our day. So we'll turn our attention to hear from Bernard-Henri Lévy. Good evening, everyone. We are honored to have with us Bernard-Henri Lévy, a French philosopher, filmmaker, activist, and author of over 30 books. His most recent book, The Will to See, Dispatches from a World of Misery and Hope, was released just in October last month. The Will to See, which also was made into a film, follows Lévy's year in 2020, as he bore witness and reported from countries around the world overcome with suffering and disrupted by war. Lévy is an intellectual and writer who has intertwined humanitarian activism with philosophical rigor. He followed the trail of the murdered Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl in Pakistan to research his book, Who Killed Daniel Pearl? He was embedded in 2016 by the Kurdish and Iraqi forces liberating Mosul, ultimately leading to the creation of the film, The Battle of Mosul, which is only first-hand account of the fall of the Caliphate's capital. Bernard-Henri Lévy is also a devoted Zionist. His book, The Genius of Judaism, is an ode to the exceptionalism of Israel and the grandeur of Jewish thought. He is widely regarded as one of the West's most important public intellectuals, and it's an honor to welcome him back here to Park Avenue Synagogue. Welcome. It's wonderful to have you. It's always wonderful to draw attention to your new work. Tonight's a special night. It's Kristallnacht, and it is the night of broken glass, a pogrom against the Jews carried out by the Nazi Party on November 9th of 1938. So perhaps we could begin this evening's conversation by asking, what does this evening mean to you, historically considered, as well as how we understand it today?
Thank you, Rabbi. The honor is for me, I must say, to be back here, approaching the end of the pandemic in this beautiful synagogue, in the middle of your community, though still virtually. For me, the real treat and the real honor. I'm happy to be back. I'm back on this very special night. You are right, anniversary of the Kristallnacht, which is really a black date in the history of the Jewish people. It was a real last start and the real spark which was about to inflame Germany and Europe in general and to fuel the final solution. When I think about it, every year, to be honest, on November 9, I have a thought and a moment of reflection about this terrible anniversary. And two things strike me. First one, that when anti-Semitism comes to its real momentum, it is like a storm. It goes very quickly. You have a time of accumulation, a time of preparation of the minds, of the habits, and suddenly, all of a sudden, this night, November 9, of 1938, it goes very quickly, like a forest fire. And we have to remind that. We are for long in the prolegomena, and suddenly the fire. And the second thing which I cannot help remembering is the relative indifference of the world in front of that. When you look at the European press on the day after, November 10, 11, 12, in Germany, in Europe in general, it is not such an event. It does not appear as a big event. Books were burnt, people were molested, shops were destroyed, a real tide of anti-Semitism started. The German people, the European people in general, did not show so much neither concern nor solidarity. So this indifference to the fate of Jews, we have to keep that in mind too. I hope it would not be the same. I hope so. I hope, as I said it 3 years ago in this very place, today we are stronger than we were because we are better armed spiritually, because we are more Jew than our grandfather were, because we did incarnate our Jewish values in synagogues like yours and others in the West and in the world. Nevertheless, we have to know that when the shops burn, when the synagogues are attacked, historically, we can be very lonely.
Yeah. And I want to pick up on these two themes you identify and draw it into the conversation of the book, because one can understand the build-up and the flames, literally and figuratively, of Kristallnacht and the world's indifference. But Kristallnacht arguably was preceded, the build-up of indifference, that you had, I think that summer, the Evian conference where the world did nothing. You had Munich in 1939 where Chamberlain capitulated with the Sudetenland. And this idea that must have been formulating in Hitler's mind that he could get away with anything because the world was not going to act. And we know the horrific consequences of that. And so in some ways, it's a morality lesson that goes directly to the subject matter of the book, that the consequence of indifference in the face of evil is not only the persecution being experienced by the afflicted, but it's also that the aggressor sees that as a cue that their actions will go on without response.
Unpunished, unresponded. And you have another example. 15 years before, you had another November 9. The Kristallnacht happened herself for an anniversary of the first failed coup of Hitler. When Hitler tried...
I didn't know that, yeah.
Yeah, it was already November 9. Which makes some historians suspect that Kristallnacht did not come by chance. It was, in a way, planned for this anniversary of the failed putsch of Hitler. So, what I want to say is that years before, you had a failed coup, you had the publication of Mein Kampf, you had some aggressive SS or SA in the streets of Munich and Berlin. And the world did not pay real attention. And even some Jews in Vienna, like Sigmund Freud, in Germany, like Ernst Kantorowicz, the great historian, like Marc Bloch in France, great academic. Few of our best minds, we, the Jewish people, They did not understand. They did not believe it could happen. Anti-Semitism was, in a way, unbelievable, at least to this extent. And the Jews were at the same time prepared and taken and caught by surprise. This is a paradox of Kristallnacht. Everything was here to announce Kristallnacht. And nevertheless, the victims of this night, those who began their journey to the end of this night, were not prepared. So this unpreparation of the Jews is for me a great mystery, a great source of sorrow, and a great source of concern and mobilization today. Because today in Europe, in the rest of the world, including of America, we see signs which are accumulating of a storm. One day we see them, one day we choose not to see them. One day we feel very strong and very confident in our future, and one day we understand that we have to be very careful. So there is a balance to be found between the two. And this is a role which affirmative Jews, as those who attend this synagogue, for example, this is what they have to think about. We have to see the signs without panic, without too much anxiety, but without turning a blind eye to what is happening. What do I mean? Denial of Holocaust, anti-Zionism and hatred of Israel, stupid plot and dangerous plot and conspiracy theories, stupid theories about competition between victims and between suffering and memories, all that, idea that the Jews are warmongers, creators of all that, plutocrats. You have a bunch of an accumulation of black stars which are above our heads, which are still under control for the moment, but which could be the prelude to the worst. We have to know that with calm, with pride, with moral strength, but without political weakness.
So let's turn our attention to the book, which it's hard for me to say I very much enjoyed it, because it's a very difficult book to read in the sense that it is a travel log of some of the most difficult scenes around the globe right now. War-torn places, mass graves, open-air prisons in Libya, Mogadishu, Lesbos. This is a very important book and a very difficult book because of the stories that you tell and you witness firsthand. And I was struck by the fact, not just the horror, but also I consider myself a fairly informed person. I read the papers, I listen to NPR, but I was reading about places in the world that of horrific things taking place that I didn't know about. The plight of Nigerian Christians that these unknown, not just to me, but to the West when I turn on the news, when I open up the paper. So how do you understand this phenomena? Is it that we are on overload? Are we exhausted? Is there a sense of isolationism, that we just are not paying any attention? I mean, we say never again. We know the evils of indifference, and yet here we are uninformed.
No, it's true that the Nigerian story is still relatively unknown. I say is because my book is out since a few days, so I hope that it will bring the book awareness to the tragedy of our Christian brothers in Nigeria who are prosecuted and martyrized because Christian. It was unknown. Why? Because this part of Nigeria, of Africa, and in Africa of Nigeria is very difficult of access, very uneasy to go there. You need time, you need energy, you need... it is difficult. And there were very few reporters. There were a few reporters about Boko Haram abducting and kidnapping the little girls 7 or 8 years ago, but since then, nothing. And Boko Haram are among the most terrible Al-Qaeda or ISIS people in the world. So it has not been really documented. And this is why I did it, because in my position, with the little credit which I could have, a few people listen to me, read my books, see me when I appear at your side. If I repeat what everybody says, what for? If I do investigations which have already been made, unuseful. My only use is to go in places where few people have gone, is to bring back information which is unknown, which is to document things which are in the darkness and in the night. And this is the purpose of this book. You said Nigeria, but Mogadishu, since Mogadishu is a very strange place where there is no Westerner, no place for a Westerner to be. There is the idea of an hotel does not exist. The last hotels were blown up by terrorist attacks, no embassies of any Western country, and very difficult access. And nevertheless, it's an important place because it's a strategic place to be for the Turks of Erdogan, who are not precisely the friends neither of America nor to France, and nor to the Jews. It's an important place for Muslim Brotherhood and all their affiliates. It's an important place for, it begins to be an important place for Iran. So when you have these guys taking over a country, Turkey, maybe tomorrow Iran, Muslim Brotherhood, it means that it is strategic. And nevertheless, there is nobody, no reports. So again, I tried my best to go and to bring back the information I could. I stayed a few days there. I went around. I went till the proper front line where the Al-Qaeda people, which are called Al-Shabaab, are holding the line very close to Mogadishu, and I brought all that is in the book. So, a rule of the game for a public intellectual like me, try to do what would not be done or would less be done if I did not exist, or if I retired, or if I was taking the sun with my family.
So in a way, it doesn't matter whether it's exhaustion, being overwhelmed with social media, or an increasing sense of isolationism politically. The point of this is to shed a spotlight and to tell the stories that are not being told, whether that's in print, in the film that I know is going to be coming out. I also want to let you know that I was so moved by the human element of these stories. The chapter on what's happening in Lesbos and the camp camp that was designed for 1,800 soldiers and then went to 3,000 and now over 20. I think it was burnt down in September of last year. But the diphtheria, the diarrhea, the violence, the living conditions. I'd just like to read a section of this that you write on my visit several months earlier, a report from Doctors Without Borders asserting that one of Mariah's distinguished characteristics is child suicide. Here's a story of one child. The boy is 12. We are within the confines of the camp in the wild area known as the jungle, where some of the Syrians with whom Erdogan threatened to inundate Europe last March washed up. For the duration of our interview, except for brief glances at the uncle who saved him and who, as a former teacher in Idlib, is telling his nephew's story for him, the boy keeps his eyes on the ground. It all started, his uncle says, with his nephew's inability to comprehend this new life devoid of prospects. What are we doing here? The child wanted to know. Why can't we look at the sea when it's so close? Even when the bombs were falling on Idlib, you would take me to school. So why now do we spend an entire day doing nothing but stare at the Turkish coast? Are we going to be prisoners here forever? Little by little, the boy stopped talking. He stopped playing. He spent his days lying in the broken armchair that sits in the middle of the hut and in which I sat before I knew the whole story. He lost interest in his soccer friends, wouldn't eat, and couldn't sleep. Later, I learned that one morning when his uncle was out standing in line to collect their daily ration of bread, a neighbor saw blood flowing in the drainage channel. He rushed in. The boy had traded a box of humanitarian donated cookies, accumulated one by one during the week, for the razor blades he had used to slash his wrists. I have seen many camps in my life, but barely the boundless sadness on display here. It's stories like that, the horrific human dimension, a child without hope, so much so driven to suicide. These aren't just numbers, but these are human stories, every life sacred, every life a universe lost.
There are many stories like this, alas, in this book. And what I think is that this is a test. When a civilization arrives to that, permits that, allows that, or inflicts or obliges a child and some children to that, it means that there is really something rotten in the kingdom of this civilization. The Europe of today, who have been based on the idea of welcoming the foreigners, who has been based on the very idea of, in the Greek mythology, the Princess Europe was one of those refugees herself. And her journey to Crete and to Greece was exactly the journey which this boy really did for himself. Princess Europe, on the shoulders of Zeus transformed into a bull, you know the story in the Greek mythology, it is the story of this boy. Not only we are not able to welcome the new Prince Europe, but he's compelled to suicide. This, for the European civilization, is a black swan and a black sign also, number one. Number two, I am myself among the Jews who remember that they have been foreigner enslaved in Egypt. I remember that. We are today, again, strong, proud, well-rooted in our texts, in our cities, sometimes prosperous, sometimes less. But if we don't remind that we are brothers with the parents of this child and with this child, if we don't remember that this child could be ours, something of our intimate jewelry is lost. I really think that in the bottom of my heart. And number three, you said to shed a light on some spots at the beginning. It's true. That's my aim. My aim, and if I would say it more precisely, what I try to do in such a book, as I did in my book about Daniel Pearl, which was the first book about Al-Qaeda, what I try to do is to add a piece of knowledge to what is known about the world. And there is a great master and rabbi of the past who said, one of the greatest, that to add even a drop of ink to the knowledge of the world could sanctify une parole, a word. For me, to add a drop of ink of knowledge to what we know about refugees, migrants, Europe, the fate of civilization, if I can achieve that, a drop of knowledge, une goutte de connaissance, my journey is done. And I start a new one. My journey is done.
Well, you are doing it, and you are accomplishing it, and you do ask the question, I think in that same chapter, there's also a moral call here, I believe, that you ask the question, when one comes back from that and stares at such a concentration of horror and distress, right, of women with their feet bare and innocence trampled, one cannot avoid a certain question that sweeps away all of the ideological and political quarrels. What should we do? I think that's the question that I left this book with, right? What should we do as a Jew, as an American, and obviously, you know, there's a whole chapter in the book on war and peace, and this question of interventionism, and it's beautifully written that as much as you love peace, a pacifism that allows evil to go unresponded to is not a pacifism that is worth living. And Maimonides had his famous distinction between wars of choice and wars of necessity, that sometimes we need to answer that question, what should we do?
The book is a reply to this question. And the first reply is to step out from this false dichotomy between war or peace. As for myself, I hate war, I love peace. But like Maimonides, I think that sometimes we are compelled to do war without wanting it, without liking it, but with the necessity of winning it. It was true after Kristallnacht. To go back to the start of our conversation, it was evident at this time that the world had to fight and to combat as soon as possible this rising evil. I do believe that by all means, the Christians of Nigeria have to be saved. I do believe that there is a big chapter about Afghanistan. I was there just before the fall of Kabul. And
I wanted to ask you about Afghanistan. I don't know if I can ask you a political question, but obviously there are horrible things going on in Afghanistan right under our noses right now. And
it's not politics. It's ethics and morality. These horrible things. It's not a matter of politics, and it's not even a matter of peace or war. I was so surprised to see the debate in America around the idea of endless war, and you had Republicans and Democrats, bipartisan consensus, saying America has to get rid of endless war. Except that it was not an endless war in Afghanistan. It was a military deployment, which is very different. Since 18 months, by the way, there was absolutely zero casualties. And since 6 or 7 years, the American soldiers, brave, taking their risk, doing their duty, they were in a non-combat mission. So it's not peace or war. And this way of feeding the public, the audience, with these sort of Armageddon, false dichotomy, is bad job. The reality in Afghanistan is that we had a sort of more political, symbolical, moral presence of a great country, America, with a great creed, democracy, and this was sufficient. This was enough to keep at large, to keep into respect the Taliban and to prevent them from killing, death, stoning the women and closing them in burqa and so on. So the real life, the real Yeshuvization of the world is something much gray, much more complex. And a great country as ours, America, and in the less extent, France, has a role to play. Not intervene, not export values, but be supportive, at least, of those who share the same values as we. Be supportive of those who sometimes are the front line and the first line of defense, which prevents terrorist attack, new Bataclan in France or September 11 in America to occur. The minimum is to show solidarity, to encourage, to support.
So, leaving governments aside, I know that there are many of our younger members of our community watching right now who are themselves asking these questions of what should I do, what can I do, what can I be reading, how can I be engaged, teenagers, maybe college students who are asking this question. And I'm wondering, what counsel do you have for a young person in our community who's seeing what's going on in the world right now and wondering what they can do?
Since I am myself a teenager, I think that there is one big political and ethical vice or defect or fault or mistake, which is egoism. Egoism. To entrench oneself in your selfishness, to enclose yourself in the fortress of your beliefs, of your prosperity, if you are prosperous, and even of your community. There is a duty to open to the other, for any human being, and even more for a Jew. I really believe that the role of a Jew in the metaphysics of the world is to take care of the other Jews, of course, to take care of his companion of congregation, of synagogue, but also the rest of the world. If we really believe in Messianism, even in a secular way, I would say, if we really believe that a man has a role to play in history, I think that the role of a young Jew is to help particularly the afflicted, the wretched, the distressed people of this world to save themselves. And this is a moral duty, this is a humanitarian role, this is the part of universalism which is embedded in the Jewish thought. And if we turn our back to these values and to this concern for others, I think we turn our back to a big part of what the Jewish thought is.
Bernard Henri Lévy, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for this very important book, The Will to See. And I want to thank you on behalf of all of us for serving humanity as a proud Jew, an example to us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks to all those who are here at this moment. Thank you.
We conclude this evening with a poem and the recitation of Kaddish. A Night of Fire and Glass by Stacy Robinson. Stars littered the ground, crystal fire, shards of ice, glass. The smoke of 1,000 years ascended, coiling upwards, twisted with the memory of a people chosen once in light, chosen again in darkness, in ashes, and in blood. Pounding rhythms shout out, felt through souls, driving forward, driving onward, faster and faster and faster, and pulled forward, pulled ever onward. In a rush, at a run, rippling in shadow, it invades your blood, that rhythm, that pulse, that pull and push, that wraps round your heart in pounding and pulsing rhymes, that cradle your source, your soul. The darkness swallows the cries of 1,000 lights, 1,000 years, 1,000 sighs of love, of hope, of God, leaving only broken glass and crystal fire, and glistening starts to lead us home. If you are able, I invite you to please rise, Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Kadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach Yerutei ve'amlich malchutei, B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Olmei Olmaya. Yit Barach v'yishtabach v'yit Pa'ar v'yit Romam v'yit Naseh. V'yit Hadar v'yit Alev v'yit Alal Shemei Dekudasha Brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah min Shemaya. B'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May God, who ordains harmony in the universe, grant peace to us, to Israel, to all of humanity. May we always remember, and may we never be indifferent.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Thank you for being here. This concludes our program. Have a good evening.